It's a pleasure for me to introduce today for Live at Kigali, His Excellency President Boris Tadic, President of Serbia from 2004 to 2012, now a full member of the Club de Madrid, the organization promoting democracy, the European concept of democracy across the world. Sir, there is something happening in Europe. I mean, let's look at it this way. 2011, 2012, when you were president, Serbia applied for membership of the European Union. Do you feel now, after in about 6 years from then, has something fundamentally changed in Europe? Europe was always fractious. Democracies are fractious. There will always be disputes. But the disputes have got far more polarized. There's a dispute between North Europe and South Europe, between East and West Europe. There's a dispute, there's polarization between liberal and illiberal Europe. What do you think has fundamentally changed? There's a crisis, there's economic crisis, there's a crisis of migrants, there's a crisis of identity. How do you read the current situation in Europe? What has changed?
Well, thank you for asking me that, and your question is exactly following the changes that happened in Europe in the past 6 years. And I can only say that Europe is not looking like it was 6 years ago or 15 years ago, when Europe, in terms of European Union, was hope for all countries that applied for membership. But European Union is still most secure and a pleasant place for living in the world, taking into account the law, protection of individuals, their rights, freedom of speech, and all other freedoms that are very important for human beings. But things are not going in the right direction. This is what I'm saying in accordance with my analysis. And things are going to be even more challenged in the future regarding crossroads of the history of mankind in which we are living nowadays. Everything is changing. Everything is changing very fast. 6 years ago, China didn't take such strong position in the global economy, and China was on the path to take this role. We didn't have experience with the Brexit. We didn't have experience with the populists in European Union to be presidents of the governments. In many countries from Baltic, Kaczynski in Poland, Hungary with Orban, even my country and my region towards Turkey, we have something like a movement of populists that are dividing European Union specifically, and that are bringing many European countries in a very difficult situation. This is very easy to be populist nowadays, especially if you are taking into account crisis with the migrants. The Europe is not the strongest phenomena in the political world, but Europe is also vulnerable. This is a crystal clear after crisis with migration. Only 5 million migrants were trying to come into Europe. Europe has 500 million people. 1% of them destabilized structure institutions in Europe. This is a crystal clear evidence of vulnerability, and this is why we have to rethink of democracy, democratic standards, democratic institutions. How that institutions are going to be able to deal with such challenge. Migration crisis exploded within European body and the heart with so many prejudices and stereotypes. And this is also discovering the weakness of Europe. When I'm saying Europe, I'm thinking about European Union. And in that respect, I'm expecting European Union leaders, a new generation of European Union leaders, to be very serious in creating real reforms that are going to dismantle that kind of stereotypes, to create European Union more capable to receive and to absorb new initiatives that are coming from the world, even migrations that are natural outcome of the global politics, and to understand what is European Union interest in the future. European Union is facing with demographic challenges, but European Union is refusing people that would like to come in Europe. This is controversial issue, and this is also crystal clear evidence that something is going very wrong in Europe nowadays.
When you were president, as I said, it was during your tenure that you applied for membership of the European Union. Serbia wanted to become a full-time member. Do you think that project is still on course? Is it worth it? Is it worth being part of the EU in the current state?
That was my dream, and the dream of my political generation. Even during the communist time, we as a young students, we've been dreaming about to become member state of European Union, to become democratic country one day. I was doing everything that is possible to bring Serbia closer to European Union, and we reached during my terms candidate status. And just before that, Stabilization Association Agreement, which provided so many resources for my country in order to be more developed. But nowadays, when we are negotiating about every single chapter, I can see that that process is not going so fast, and that process is not that productive. And what I see in European Union, there is a crystal clear enlargement fatigue. And even President of France, Macron, have said yesterday, Lucas, we cannot agree on who is going to lead our European institutions, and I'm totally against any enlargement process until we are going to solve that challenge, that problem. That kind of statements are totally unhelpful. And this is very dangerous. And this is crystal clear evidence that Macron, as a new European Union leader, is thinking more about its own country and European Union, that wider perspective of European Union. And this is possible to take that kind of position, but this is not helpful in terms of the future of European Union.
The fundamental flaw in the EU project right from the beginning?
In the European Union, we have a crystal clear enlargement fatigue, and I'm saying, okay, Serbia and other Western Balkans countries are approaching closer to European Union, but that kind of approach is, I can define as a asymptotic approach. You are getting closer, but never becoming member state. And this is very useful for European Union leaders because of enlargement fatigue in their own countries. They don't have to explain to the electorate that some countries like Serbia, Northern Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina are going to become member state. This is not very healthy for their political position in their own country, but this is totally unhealthy in our region because we are very fragile and a vulnerable region that has been many times involved in a conflict, and also we are connection between European Union and Turkey and Asia. And this is very important to be understandable for everyone among the European Union leaders. But I have a concerns that maybe some of them are not real strategical thinkers. And this is problem nowadays for Europe that has to be changed with the so fast changes, so many challenges all around the world. This is about Western Balkans, about definition of Europe, European identity, but also which kind of relations with the Turkey Europe is going to have in the future, what kind of relations Europe is going to have with the Russia, with the China, with the India, but not only with the United States.
So you spoke about this, Serbia being the kind of gateway of Europe into Asia, into the larger domain.
Like always.
Yes, like always. How serious is Europe has been? Because Europe has always been looking more and more towards the Atlantic in the past. Today, the Atlantic consensus, the transatlantic consensus, has kind of broken down, has got frayed. We are seeing it coming apart. At the same time, there is, China at the doors. There are divisions in Europe itself about where China is headed, and there are very deep-seated divisions. Serbia is part of the 16+1 arrangement. It joined the 16+1 arrangement. How do you see the role of China in Europe? Is China an integrative force? Is China is a divisive force? How is it emerging in Europe? What effect are Chinese investments having across Europe?
There are different views in the European Union. Some politicians are considering China as a divisive force. Some are considering China as an integrated force, which is helping developing of the Eastern and Central European countries that are not developed like the Western countries, because Western countries cannot invest such a significant amount of investments like China nowadays. But I see China's role very positive. If you are taking into consideration statistics, we can see that investments from China in Europe are smaller than European investments in China. And those kind of politicians that are accusing China because of making new divisions in Europe, forgetting about the investments in China, and everyone who is normal and who is working in politics is expecting a kind of equilibrium and the balanced politics and the balanced investments policy. And this is why I think that that kind of arguments are not very helpful. But everyone is thinking about China nowadays. Only 5 years ago, I'm witness of that, no one was even mentioning China. Chinese embassy was bombed in Serbia during the war with the NATO in 1999. Nowadays, no one is able even to think about such scenario in the future. Look how things are changing very fast. But in Europe, no one is mentioning India. But India is coming immediately after China regarding developing and regarding interests of India, which is going to be, from my point of view, also global power is in next decades. And this is something very important to be able to consider developing in the world in terms of wider perspective, and to understand what is going to be final outcome of the new political and economic relations we have in the global arena. Europe was mostly oriented towards the United States. In that respect, NATO was a basically security organization for many or mostly of European Union countries. But now the situation is changing. And I'm afraid that no one is able to predict what is going to be with us, not only with the European Union and European countries in next 5 or 10 years. Things are getting unpredictable and unpredictable.
I'll come to NATO later, but first let me get back to the question on China. There is a trade war going on. There's more than a trade war, there's a technology war going on between the United States and China. Countries are being asked to choose in many ways as to what kind of a global order would they prefer, what kind of a technology order would they prefer. Now, is Europe also finding itself caught in this conflict? And Serbia as a country, what does it feel of this strategic choice, which, if it poses a strategic choice between having a China tech and a US tech, or a Chinese world order and a US world order? What do you make of this choice that is being posed?
This is a really difficult question, but I will try to point out crystal clear answer on that issue. We are defining ourselves. We are between East and West. We are gate of Europe towards Asia, historically speaking, regarding our geostrategical position. We would like to become member state of European Union. But to be member state of European Union, it doesn't mean that we cannot be in a good relations with Russia, with China, with India. This is exactly our position nowadays. I can say that even government that came after my term is following the strategical orientation. This is very important. I don't see alternative to that position. In that respect, I am that president of Serbia who signed strategic partnership with China in 2009. I see benefit of that. Today we have a 16, even Greece is joining to the club, 17 plus 1 country, which is a project of Chinese investments in infrastructure. This is something that is coming after our signing strategic partnership with China. This is positive trend. And I'm expecting China to follow exactly the direction which is defined by President Xi Jinping, that China is not interfering in the relations of some other countries, and China is working on One Belt, One Road initiative in order to bring benefit for all partners, for China and for other countries. If that is going to be different initiative and different orientation, that is not going to bring benefit for everyone. I said that many countries and politicians are having prejudices regarding Chinese role right now in European Union, but I hope that that initiative is going to be finally successful. If you are putting Serbia in the position to make a choice between China and United States or Russia and European Union, we are crystal clear on that. We do not want to join Russia. We do not want to join China. We do not want to join United States. We want to join European Union, but we want to have a normal strategical relations with such important countries, plus India, like all other member states of European Union.
Final question. You mentioned NATO and the strategic alliance, which was a security alliance. Today, as a result of the breakdown of the transatlantic partnership, which had Europe and America joined at the hip for so many decades during the Cold War, that seems to be getting frayed. That is kind of coming apart. There is talk in certain quarters in Europe of building a new security architecture, which also means maybe talking in terms of Europe building its own security forces. Do you think that is the way to go? Is that one part of the reforms when you talk about, when you say the EU must reform, is that one of the reforms?
When I was talking with my European friends during my terms, that was initiative started by some of them to create their own armed forces. And when I asked them, is that going to be something parallel to the NATO or against the NATO, they said no way. For us, is a strategical orientation to be involved in the NATO structure. But I don't know is that true or not, to be very frank with you. And I don't know is that true or not, especially in the context of the future. European Union itself is 500 million people, in fact, strongest economy in the world, if we are looking the European Union altogether, without armed forces. Without armed forces, you cannot be global power, especially without navy.
Or an independent global power.
Or independent global power. In that respect, I don't know what is going to be final outcome, but after Brexit, we can see many divisions, not only within European Union structure, but maybe in the NATO in the future. We'll see what is going to be final outcome. But if I'm trying to predict that kind of processes, I would like to say this is dilemma among the European Union strategists. And some of them are taking into account European Union interests in the future. I have to add something to that. Every single European Union country is not able to compete on the global market in next 5 to 10 years. Even Germany, which is the strongest economy in Europe. Germany with 80 million people is not able to be competitor on global market with India, with China, with United States. Maybe in the future even with Russia, even though Russia today is not that developed, especially in terms of technology and the internal structure, which is not able to follow economic development still because of not making crucial reforms in this very important country. But if you're asking me whether European Union is going to work on enhancing a military structure, independent military structure, I can say probably yes. Probably yes. But that is going to bring new problems and new dialogue within the NATO. We'll see what.
Would that also mean perhaps the pathway to better relationship with Europe's big eastern neighbor, which is Russia?
This is
the ties which have been under great strain?
This is exactly issue that has to be discussed if European Union is going to work on building their own armed forces. United States strategically thinking, having a kind of concern about that kind of relations because they are following carefully what's going on in terms of economy. Economic cooperation between some European Union countries and Russia is not the same like political relations. You can see so many investments, thousands and thousands, companies that are coming from Germany, France, Italy, Spain, even Great Britain, working in Russia. Look, energy agreement, Nord Stream and other projects that are on the way. European Union is pretty dependent on import of Russian gas and Russian energy because this is the cheapest and most reliable partner in that respect. It's not easy to find the other solutions that are going to be much more expensive and farther than Russia, the deposit of the gas and oil. And in that respect, we have to take into consideration reality. And if we are analyzing carefully reality, we can see different interests of United States and some European Union countries, especially leading European Union countries. Outcome of that is that statement of Donald Trump regarding Germany and Angela Merkel, regarding their position in the NATO. In that respect, we can take into consideration seriously all statements of Donald Trump in past 2 years, even though some of those statements are not looking that serious. But finally, we have to understand what the strategical point of view which is lying behind of that kind of statements. What is even more concern, is making me even more concerned is that now even Russia is dismantling agreement on missiles. This is what President Putin has signed today, and we are living in the trade war, we are living in that kind of threats and withdrawing from such strategical agreement on reducing missiles. We are living in the middle of the crisis with Iran. Once again, we are living in a totally insecure world, but we'll see what is going to be final outcome. Every entity, not only United States, China, Russia, India, but also European Union are looking for a chance to find more stable and more secure position for the decades that are coming.
And our hope is that Serbia is going to be critical in the new formulations which shape Europe and shape the next few years.
Serbia, in my view, even though European Union is facing with such problems, has to become a member state of European Union. This is, after all analysis I'm doing, this is the best solution, and there is no alternative to that. But Serbia has to be interlocutor. As a former member of a non-aligned movement, as a former Yugoslavia, good friend of India, good friend of China, African countries, the continent of the future regarding population, demography, and the potential of the human capital in Africa, Serbia can take such specific role. Serbia is not global power. We are not the country which is taking role like it was during the 60s, during the Cold War. But nowadays, Serbia can be very useful and helpful regarding that kind of relations that are necessarily in order to solve some specific problems. We have very good traditional relations with all countries I mentioned, and this is why I think that we can contribute even to European Union with our capacity to be interlocutor.
Thank you so much, President Tadic, and especially on that ending note that Serbia becomes a balancing factor in a world which is actually teetering on the brink of collapse in many, many ways. Serbia plays an extremely critical and important role. All the best to you. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. I enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.